Hi, today I am going to be talking to you about using the CodeHS IDE. And when we're getting into the CodeHS IDE, we're going to talk about um, navigating the editor, like how do we get around it, what features and tools we have available. We're going to talk about writing code, running code in the IDE, responsiveness of the IDE, and I'll explain what I mean by that. And then where do I use the IDE, or what are some different features of it that I'm going to use at different times? So you can sign up for a free account if you need to when you're in by going to codehs.com/sign up. And when you go to this, you always want to sign up as a teacher and using your teacher email, and we will verify you as a teacher if you don't have an account. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we need to talk about is what is an IDE? So we have our own IDE, and an IDE is our integrated development environment. We also use another word as our code editor. And so when we're in our code editor or IDE, we do a couple different things within here. We can write code, we can run code, and then we can look at some different kinds of documentation as well. And we're going to go a little bit more into depth into each of these. So first thing we're going to talk about is navigating the IDE. So when we're navigating the IDE, this is our code editor and or the IDE, and this is what it looks like when we're running a program for Carol. So Carol is graphics based, and it is a beginning JavaScript language or program. And we have three different sections that we really divide our code editor or IDE into. So we have 1, 2, and 3. And our first one we call our cheat sheet. So we're on our cheat sheet over here on the left-hand side of our IDE. This is our resulting world, and it might have some cheat codes or what we call a cheat sheet. The reason we call it a cheat sheet is because here down at the bottom, you can see it says docs, move, turn left. This is just within this lesson for students, these are some things that you learned during that time, so it's easily accessible to them. Okay, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what this docs means here in a second. Over here on the left-hand side, you also can do something else, and I will show you when I get into the platform and actually show you around. In the cheat sheet, like I said, it shows the end result, and it has the useful commands for completing those exercises. Our second area is our code editor. So in our code editor, what we're actually going to do is we can change our editor settings in here. We can switch between block view and code view, and I will show you an example in a little bit. And then, but also know that blocks are only available in Carol exercises, HTML, and our coding and art, music, and sports. And then the other thing we're going to do is this is where we're going to write our code. There is a save button at the top, but it automatically saves. So it's just like a foolproof, way. If you definitely want to be able to save, you can do that. And then we also have our submit and continue button at the right side at the top of this section as well. After a student is completed with their assignment, when they press submit and continue, it'll automatically go to an auto grader, or it will go to be submitted to a teacher. So, and I'll explain those here in just a second as well. And then across the bottom, we also have our activity bubbles. So our activity bubbles are kind of a pathway of is the way that we're moving in the course. And so what that means is within each module, these are the lessons, and then within this lessons, these are the assignments, and they can navigate back and forth between those, and I'll show you that as well. Then we have our third area. Our third area is called our editor, with which we have editor tabs. So we have several different tabs across the top. And within our editor tabs, we're going to look at a couple of them, and then we're going to wait a little bit later and look at some of the other ones. So within this one, first of all, we look at our run code. So when we run the code, what that does is we press this run button here, and it'll make Carol do whatever we did in this middle section where we wrote our code. The second one we have is our assignments. Notice we are going to skip test cases. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. The assignment, when you click on the assignment tab, what it'll actually do is it'll bring up what the assignment exercise description is, or what is required to complete that assignment. And so I oftentimes like leaving this open when I'm writing in code, especially if there's specific steps I need to answer. The next one is our docs tab. So I mentioned on the left-hand side, it was those like little cheat things, but this also on the right-hand side is our docs. And so our docs is a full documentation of the language that you're working in. And so I will show you that in the editor when we get into it, and how to navigate it, but it is there across the top, and there are different sections of it, and it will change based on the language that you are using or the program that you're using at that time. We're also going to skip the grade. The grade is where it allows the teachers to grade the exercise, but it also is where a student might be able to see what they have gotten as well. But under the More tab, there's a couple things that I specifically want to point out. The first one is your code history. And so code history is here. We're going to talk about that more in depth. Code history allows a student to see snapshots of their work at different points within a specific time. Anytime something is changed and written in, it'll be there. And then whenever you hit the save button, it will save to that as well. The other thing under the More tab is conversations. So a student can have a conversation with you, and then you can have a conversation with the student back digitally, and that is under the More tab. And then you as a teacher would be able to see notifications that your students, when they ask for help or anything like that, by looking at the our notification bubble kind of right there. And then we also have help mode, and we're going to talk about help mode here in just a little bit, but that's also the other place that if a student has questions, you can go to help questions or overview, and you can see in the conversations what they specifically are, what exercise they're stuck on, their name, the timestamp that they sent it, and then a preview of their question. And I also mentioned the code history here. It just kind of gives you a look at what it looks like in real time. I'm going to show you that here in a second. So let's look at our IDE together. So as I mentioned, this is our IDE, and we have this part on the left-hand side, our right-hand side, or our middle and our left-hand side. So the part that I wanted to show you over here on the left is there's two different tabs. And if I go to this, I also can navigate. So this is my first lesson, and I can go to the different things here. So as you may have noticed, there's different colors. And so one of the things that we can see at a snapshot, as students can see that and teachers can see of how well they're doing or what they've completed over here, and you can see it in the bubbles across the bottom as well. But on the left-hand side, the main thing we can do is look at our result world. We can show exercise and the pop-up will pop back up, or we can look at our quick docs. That is just a reminder of the things that you learned in that lesson that you might need to be able to use. Then this is our middle part, and this is the part here. I'm going to skip over this. We're going to go this here in a second. Here's the documentation. This is specifically for Carol, so it's JavaScript. And you can see if I expand this, I can go to, maybe I want to go to loops, and I want to look at while loops, and it takes me down to that. Or I can just scroll. So you can scroll down the whole thing, and what it does is it gives some examples, it gives them some reasoning behind it, and then it gives them some little tips then as well in certain areas. So this is an example of an if statement that is actually done. This one is a blank if statement. Okay. And you can see that it goes through here. So students are able to look at this, and you also have a full documentation if you want to as well. The thing I wanted to show you is the grade. So as a student, you can see what kind of grade that they've gotten on here, and then the More tab. So the conversation, is if I go to the conversation and I ask a question, and I'm going to actually go back to one that I've asked a question on. Let me navigate through here because I don't exactly remember which one. There. Okay, you can see that this one, I started it and I submitted it. So that automatically got put into here is in a conversation portion. I'm going to go to my second one, my short stack. If I go to conversation, it's the same thing, started and submitted. But I'm looking for the one that I did. I think it was make a tower. So in make a tower, when I go to this, if I go to my conversation tab, I can see 4. So I know that this is the one. So I already, as a student, said, I can't figure this out. Can you please help me? And the teacher said, sure. It looks like you're on the right track at the end. What else could you try here? Okay. So what this does is it brings you to this program that it's not completely done, and we need to figure out then how to fix some things, or the teacher can write back and give hints of different sorts. Okay. Now, speaking of the teacher side, I did want to show you very quick. So, because I'm looking at the student view, I'm going to show you very quickly the teacher view. So if I go to my sections here and I go to this course, okay, I know that I'm a student here. Okay. So I'm going to go to code review. And this is where you would see questions. And so this says the students have submitted this and I can give them full credit, but the question would actually show up here, or it would show up here. Wait till that goes away. Show up here and you can see where somebody might have asked a question up here as well. So that's from the teacher side. And what I am showing you today is mostly all from the student side, so you can understand, and I will switch back and forth to the teacher side a little bit as well. Okay. So I want to go back to running the code then. We looked at the conversation. If I go to history, I can see my different history over time. You can see how it's changed. Oh, I went back. Oh, I did too much. Now I did here. Okay, so one of the things I want to show you is if I accidentally delete this, and you can see that it's saving my code right now. And so if I was to accidentally delete this, like I just did, why is it saving? Still saving. Let's see if it will save and continue. Okay, so it's not, let's continue anyways, and then I will just go back to that one. So I know that it's saved. Let's go back to make a tower. Okay, so you can see that nothing is here. So if I go into my history tab here, I can see that at 228, I had nothing, but I can go back in and I can hit this and it brings it back to where I was. Okay, so that's the main 2 things that they will use in the more tab. On the run tab, then, when we're talking about going back in and running code, we have our run and we have our test cases. So the first thing I want to talk about first is writing code before we start to run anything. Okay. So when we write code, we are really looking at 3 different things specifically. We're looking at commenting, syntax, and errors. And so when they write something in this area, and this is a sandbox program, so you're not going to see the cheat sheet over here on the left-hand side. I just wanted to show you some different things in the actual editor part here and where we write the code. And so when you can see that everything is color coded or highlighted in different areas. And so when I am to comment out my code and use the 2 brackets here, you can see that we get this green highlighting. Right? So this is a comment, this is a code that will not actually run. And then we have another thing called syntax highlighting. So you can see the different parts. So you can see the function name, and then an argument that we try to pass. And then anything that I was to write in here would just be black. Okay. And then we can also see error highlighting. So when I'm talking about error highlighting is there's a couple different things that happen. When we have something that is a functionality error or a syntax error, there will be a red highlight on the number over here. And it will, this one specifically say you wrote put ball, basically saying you need a semicolon at the end. And so I know that this is has an error in it. And so if I was to put this semicolon in here, the error highlighting disappears. The next one is also an error. So if I click over this, what the yellow typically means is that there's an indentation error. And so if I was to move this here, it would go away. I'm going to show you that if I was to do this here, you can see that now I have that indentation error. Okay. And so then they are both gone away now. So that's our writing our code. Okay. And the next thing we're going to talk about is actually running our code. So when we're running our code, I'm going to go back to this short stack exercise. Actually, I want to do this one. I don't want this one. So I'm going to close these out so I remember where I am. So this one, if I go to assignment, it says I need to write a program to have Carol build a tower of tennis balls, and Carol should end at the top of the tower. So it should look like this. So when I go to the very beginning and running my code, I know Carol's not in the right position. So I've wrote some code. I'm going to go ahead and run this. And so that is our first tab. One of the things you can notice is that we can make it run very slow or very fast. So I'm going to put it somewhere in the middle. We can also reset. We can go back one step, pause it, or forward one step, and I will show you that here in a second. So if I run this completely, you can see that Carol is running through each step, and as Carol is going, there is a highlight on each line of code. And so when we're going up here and, oh, I'm not done. Why am I not done? It doesn't look like the end result. And it's also going to give me another error here when I'm running it, saying, oops, Carol should be facing east, but is facing north. And so what if I wanted to go back a step? So if I went back a step here, you can see that it's going to highlight the different things that it's doing. And I can pause it in the middle, say I was going to run it. I can pause it at any specific time, or I can go backward and I can go forward as well. So this one did not work. So how do we make it work? Well, one of the things I want to do is I commented this out, and now I want to see, I'm going to reset. Carol goes back to the beginning. We have another error. So this is an example of another error you can run into. And this error says that Carol doesn't know how to turn right yet. So we haven't created this function, or Carol hasn't learned in this instance how to turn right. And so what do we need to do to solve this? And so there is errors that come up that are specific to the actual functionality as well. So if I was to run this test case, this is the next thing in running our code is to test case. And so I showed you a little bit ago when I submit and continue that it'll say functionality, style, and style. It's the exact same thing in test cases. I can go and I can check my code while I'm working through it to say, okay, what am I missing here? As I know right now, my syntax didn't work because turn right is not defined and I can't use turn right. So if I was to turn this into turn left instead, oops, turn left instead, and I was to type that a couple more times and check my code, now my functionality works. But we have two different other things in styling down here too. And these are the errors that I showed you as far as our indentation. So if I was to move this over here and check my code, it's going to tell me your indentation is off on a specific line. Okay. So I'm going to delete that, check my code. Now I have them all correct. But we have another one, and another one is it's more syntax related. So if I was to check this code, it's going to tell me, well, you have an invalid command. It should actually be this, and it says you're missing a semicolon on line 11. So it gives you a lot of different errors, and the students are learning from their mistakes as they're going and in the checking code through the auto graders. I'm going to check code and I'm all correct here. All right. So that was writing our code and running our code. I went a little bit ahead. Okay. So now we're going to go back. We're going to go into responsive. And what does that mean? So responsive means that when I'm in a program, just as I was in the Carol program, I'm going to open that back up. For this one specifically, what I'm going to get on the right-hand side is really, and on the left-hand side, honestly, is dependent on what program or what language that I'm using. And so, for example, this is JavaScript with Carol. But if I was to go to a Java program, now I have my IDE in the left hand looks a little bit different. I have a couple different options for files. I can make new files or folders over here in Java. I also have access to both of my files here. And as you noticed, this right-hand side is no longer graphics based. It is a console output. And so it will look like that specifically. So it's going to look differently based on the language. Another example is going to be whether it is an HTML. So in HTML, this is kind of like a mini browser over here. So if I was to write a paragraph here and say hello world, oops, let's do an H1. I cannot type today, guys. H1, I'm going to go hello world, and it's going to run the code, and it's going to look like that in a browser. I can actually see this in a new window, and it would be the exact same thing. Okay. And so that's why it's responsive. It's going to change based on what the student needs for the program or for the specific language that they are using. JavaScript, Python, Java, C++, SQL, they're all going to look a little tiny bit different based on that. Okay. The last part I wanted to show you today is, so where do I use the IDE? Obviously, you're going to see them in coding assignments like I just showed. A couple other places you're going to see are in practice and in the sandbox. So the very first thing I want to show you is practice. And why am I going to this one? Well, coding assignments have auto graders assigned to them. There are associated with specific coding assignments associated with a section or a course. The practice then has auto graders, but they're not associated with a specific assignment or course. They're just a program, like or a language, a programming language. So as a student, I want to show you how to get to this as a student and as a teacher. So as a student over here on the left-hand side, I'm going to scroll down to go to my practice. So when I go to my practice, I can go to a program or a practice thing here, and I'm going to pick Python this time. And I'm going to look at a basic sum. And as you can see, when I hit to here, it takes me to my IDE for my Python program. For this one specifically, what does it want me to do? I need to write a function that takes in two numbers and returns the sum of those two numbers. Okay, so it starts you off here. You have your scratch pad. You can write and test your function in here. You can add your test here, but the unit test is the only thing that is actually graded, okay, when you submit. And you can see that the only thing that looks a little bit different here is instead of saying run, it says output in the console, okay? So that's practice. You're going to see those there. The other place you're going to see them is in the sandbox. So our sandbox is a place where you can create open-ended programs. And so by doing this, oh, I forgot I was going to show you as a teacher as well. So in the teacher section, over here, our left nav looks just a little bit different, but I can scroll down to under the curriculum tab, we have our practice app. So when a practice app is here as on the teacher side, it will look exactly the same. And then you'll be able to, if I click on that sum, it'll look like exactly the same. And now you're seeing the exact same thing that students would see as well. All right, let's go back to the sandbox. So the sandbox is available for both teachers and students as well. They are going to have a very similar look. There's going to be a couple different things with the teacher side as they're going to be able to see the student sandboxes. But let's just say I want to make a program. So I'm just going to call this my first program. And you can call it whatever you want, and you create your first program there. And so now I'm going to decide what program type I want. And so this is how the IDE is going to look different. Obviously, we talked about Carol, and some JavaScript graphics are going to look different than our console-based JavaScript, or our Java. Our HTML is going to look different, our C++, our SQL. So I'm going to go to SQL just for an example, and I'm going to create program. And as soon as it loads here, you can see that we don't have a left-hand side. We only have our SQL and our right-hand side. And so again, we don't have our cheat sheet because we don't need it. This isn't assigned to a specific assignment or a course, because so we don't have anything. This is open-ended. This is the creative part of all this. So this is where a student can or a teacher can create anything that they want to do. And then when they would run the code, it would end up here on the right-hand side. Okay. So that's the three places that you mainly see the IDE. So we do have some other resources here if you're ever available. And if you want to learn more about bringing CodeHS to your school or district, you can go to codehs.com/learn more. And I want to thank you for joining me today. Have a great day.